Hi there everybody, my name is Kate and welcome to my channel, Trinergy Awakens Naturally. I'm coming to you live, Technicolor kinda, whenever you see this, from Garden of the Gods in Colorado Springs, Colorado. A very magical place, a very transformative place, a healing place, and yeah, just all kinds of rock formations full of wisdom. The trees I'm in, actually, one of my favorite resting spots in here. These trees are big talkers, and I love to come and hug them, sit with them, and learn from them, and just pour into them and say thank you so much for being a stable force. No matter what's happening inside my life, I know I can always come over to Garden of the Gods, no matter what time of year it is, and find respite here. It's a very tender and beautiful place with thousands of people who crawl into it and really have no idea what they're experiencing while they're here. Not every level of it. So the reason that I stopped mid-walk was this is a place where I have learned a lot, where I've learned about alchemy, you know, and really healing the heart and moving through energy and understanding some pretty complex higher dimensional energy understandings of quantum level spiritual science, if you will, that's been downloaded to me, gifted to me, and kind of untangled here for me and with me for the human understanding, because, you know, whatever my higher self or selves or, you know, master alchemist in me might know, you know, my human gotta know, and please find a way that makes sense to me, and that is actually accurate and can be verified out here, you know, in my experience, in science, and, you know, confirmation, synchronicity, however it's coming to me. It helps tremendously, and this has been a great source of learning for me. So part of what I wanted to untangle a bit today is entanglement. We talk about in quantum physics, we talk about quantum entanglement, and I won't go into that side of it because that's not where I'm coming from. I'm coming from the spiritual science side of it, that we see this represented in quantum entanglement. However, when you put that into the human perspective and get emotions all involved in people's energy source, you know, within them, that's where blockages happen, friend, is that we are all pure source energy. However, we all come in here with the veil of ignorance and forgetfulness or whatever. We swim through the river of, you know, whatever it is. There's 1,000 different stories for it, but we come in with the veil. We come in a fresh new package who needs to learn and relearn and remember ourselves, remember to member ourselves back, you know, to wholeness and oneness, whatever your thoughts are on that. And so where the entanglements happen, very complicated karmic stuff that's very dense and been on the planet for a long time with, you know, very opposing agendas for unification and, you know, love and light, very much not with that, you know, starting out in consciousness and breaking off into dark, you know, intentions, dark agendas, whatever your story or understanding of that is. I'm not giving gas on any particular one. I'm just saying it's clear to me we have dichotomy on this planet, and wind's picking up to say, yeah, let that breeze on through, that there's a diversity on the planet, a polarity rather, on the planet. There's not a whole lot of diversity and polarity. It's just simply bloop, bloop, black, white, up, down, right, left, etc. There's polarities along that, or excuse me, there's diversity along that polarity, but understanding how do we entangle, you know, in that quantum science, spiritual science space, how are we entangling with that in the energetic understanding of our emotions as human beings? Because we came out of pure source, and yet we're here dropped into a density, a 3D body, and an avatar that already can't carry the energy. So it's got to be stepped down into, no matter what kind of form we could be or would be or ever will evolve to be, it has to be, you know, kind of capped out into the 3D body that we have as we ascend into the light body. There's a process, you know, and some of us aren't even attempting to get on the road to that light body. They don't understand it, they don't want it, whatever, not questioning any of it, just saying that how does that pertain to us? And what has been given to me over time is that the understanding of entanglements with people, where we get into emotional entanglements and karmic entanglements through all of that war mentality, that us and them, that either or, that right left, and making ourselves very, you know, our moral compass rides to the right, it rides to the left based on what we think, what we feel is right, based on what somebody predetermined before we got here, you know, our culture, our race, our family, our whatever, and then the global consciousness of, you know, 3D greed and carnal knowledge, lower nature, etc., as we are, you know, ascending through the lower chakras up to the higher chakras in our consciousness. we're coming from pretty raw primal energy, and thank you to the wind that's breezing through me. Thank you. Cleansing a lot of stuff today. Thank you very much. That as we're coming from those lower natures and bringing that into, the higher consciousness, we need to bring that primal understanding with us. We need that, raw energy. However, refining that through to the upper chakras and getting into divinity in a more refined way as human beings. That gets real hell complicated with the relationships that we've had just in this lifetime. Never mind when we're entangling with stuff or working, if we are grid workers, ley line workers, timeline workers, reincarnation, past life regression, etc. When we're into that kind of thing, we understand even more layers of that story and the overlay and however many different spider webs of that we can go into. It gets quite complicated. So what happens though is that when we come into particularly light bearers or star seeds, however you might identify as somebody that's coming in to kind of help dissolve the system. It can help immensely to understand what the entanglement is, what the enmeshment is, the codependency is. These are the psychological terms that we've come up with as earth beings that make sense to us in the energetic space. However, we call them that through our human face, because codependency is just an entangling and an enmeshment of energy space where we just kind of are one consciousness here of, greed, lust, whatever it is. Doesn't matter. Lower nature stuff I'm talking about, because higher nature sovereign beings are not enmeshed with one another. We coexist with one another. Ideally in that space we would, or we wouldn't be sovereign energetic beings. So by getting into families or systems where the enmeshment is huge, and you have something called emotional incest, that is known mostly as parental structure or caregivers or elders of a family group who have a sexual overtone. However, I want to take that into something a little broader, that emotional incest is also when a family dynamic, particularly, let's narrow it down since it's easier to think about one concept and then learn how to pattern that out and understand how that patterns into any set of circumstances you would be assessing or looking at. That when we talk about emotional emotional incest, we're talking about parents who have no boundaries with their children. They want to know details that are very private, or they give details that are very private, or they expose the children in a way that's just very vulnerable. They have an upper hand in a way that really distorts the emotions of the child or the lower being, the one that's assessed as the lower being beneath them. That's a point of power. That's a point and a source of great a power differential established, that I know something about you, I can use that at the family dinner. I know something about you that I can expose you, I can kind of emotionally blackmail you, can be the intention sometimes, not always, but you can have that be for people who are just really sadistic and don't mind that kind of engagement with their children or their family members. Or you just have people that they've grown that system, they know that system, and that is the system that's known to them, and so they continue to perpetrate the system, even though the system is not particularly healthy. There's no healthy boundaries, there's no healthy establishment of each individuated person within the system. There's no individuation of the individuals of the system. A child's not allowed to be in the family as their child identity. They're an extension of the parent or the caregiver or the higher being, the one that's established themselves as the hierarchy, that I'm in charge here. Very, very dominant. Our society is cultured right now, moving out of that age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. We're cultured in a domination matrix and fear matrix, and fear is the perfect agenda that we can move through. And in that emotional incestuous stuff, we need our mom's approval, our dad's approval. And when it gets sexualized or it gets into the personal boundaries, whether there's actual sexual talk or not, when we move into the intimate boundaries with people and we violate that and we make that the norm, we are doing that in an energetic space as well, because anything that's already happening here is built in an energetic space somewhere else, or it wouldn't be here. So the energy is already quite enmeshed and entangled, and that's exactly what I'd like you to consider. The concept of what I'm giving you is that when you think about entanglement, quantum entanglement through the human component that we then have emotional incest, we have codependency, we have entanglement, we have stuff with people, strangers sometimes, where we're self-deprecating and throwing ourselves on the ground practically, say, oh, I'm sorry that I bumped into you, or oh no, or we're gunned up and ready to run somebody over, depending on which way we're going to react with the abuse that we've sustained, where we know I've been violated on a very intimate level and I ain't digging it, or I am violating because I'm not going to be a victim anymore, I'm going to go be a victimizer. And both of those sides are victims to the old paradigm, because neither side works, neither side is healthy, neither side allows for the individuation of something other than being heavily identified as one or the other. It's supporting the polarity. And so what comes to me, particularly today, and here comes the wind again, thank you, that by understanding those entanglements, it can be very easy to then start going to our sources of divination, if we use them, to go to tarot, to go to oracle, to go to whomever, a reader, to go to wherever for our source of information. I don't have a problem with any of that. We can go to that if we understand a little bit more before we seek answers from a divination tool of some kind. I would like people to better understand, when you go to a tarot reading or you go to a general message, an oracle message, I don't have a problem with that at all. Where I have a problem is that we oftentimes want to narrow it down to our particular story, and it's very complicated sometimes when readers are out, they're speaking, especially very highly intuitive and very gifted, that can work with multi-level stuff at one time. They're reading for a highly enmeshed group of people, a highly entangled group of people, that can be referencing the entanglement and qualities thereof that apply to 5, 6, 7 different people or generations or something, depending on how macro and micro you're going with the observation point of the listener, not the reader. The reader or the speaker of that is simply observing the entanglement sometimes. And I was listening to someone that she's an oracle reader, I believe. She's just an intuitive person who reads the energy that she's feeling and sensing and then puts out a message. And when it popped up on my timeline this morning, I thought, she's really good. She's quite able to, handle that multiple thing happening, and put it out there. And she's very gifted in being able to say too that this sounds like it's, a lot of stuff going on. And she doesn't say this is a specific, this gender, this sign, this something, which can sometimes hamper people that I want to narrow down. Do you mean Gemini me, or do you mean them? Which one do you mean? I want to go into a reading understanding that I come from myself, a very highly complicated, highly enmeshed situation in my family where I was there to help untangle and ungank that stuff. And part of being able to better serve my life is to untangle from it. And then if I'm going to catch an oracle reading or a tarot reading or some sort of other divination tool, runes, bones, whatever, or do them for myself, that I need to understand that characteristics that come through are going to often include characteristics for individual players, their specific life characteristics, as well as very broad characteristics for the clump and the dump of what's going on there, so that it better assists me in understanding, where do I hop into the energy with this? Where am I going to, in this alchemy process and in this alchemy session, where am I starting today with where I feel in my body, or where I feel very driven to move some energy, or where I need to stop and just hang out with a tree for a little bit? Where am I doing that, and how is that coming together to look at this side of the Rubik's Cube, or whatever, however you want to understand that as I'm continuing to look at this evolving thing and it's breaking apart, and I can see that in my third eye vision, then it helps me to understand I'm not looking to narrow down specific people always. Sometimes I'm working with specific energy that's just coming at me weird. And I ask, please, I don't care about getting into the personality or any of the 3D junk that we shared here on Earth, unless that's a very specific need for that session. I don't want to get it to that level, because I'm looking to rise above that. So anybody that's got, pissy stuff that they're trying to, I hate you, or they're doing their black magic or their weird stuff or anything like that, no, I don't care about why you're 3D mad. That's your butthurt, and that's for you to deal with. However, I'm here to be more and above that, and to play above that, to be able to drop something down into that might help soothe, all of that. And I can't do that if I get engaged at the level that's being thrown at me, or that I'm hearing or understanding there's a rumble in the jungle, that might be around me, or is at least, has me in their head of what, they're thinking of me or feeling about me a certain way. And it's not to say that I'm paranoid. It doesn't happen every day. However, energy pushes and energy surges and karmic returns and things like that, I do sense and I feel, and I can see, intuitively what's happening a lot. And there's a lot of karmic return for people in general that are in the same patterns. That's why when I listen to readers who are narrowing it down to a certain sign or a certain whatever, I'm like, oh, please, no, I've got, we've got a bandwidth of not just my players, from the family that I came from, but every player in that bandwidth. So it applies to not just me and my specific story. It applies to all of it. So it makes me a more broad spectrum antibiotic, if you will, to do the work, to say, pulse this better understanding and this higher vision back into that little bandwidth and push that all the way out, the quantum wave, not just in my family or my past or my engagement with anyone, all the way in that bandwidth, all the way in that timeline, every one of those, wherever they are, generational, timeline, bloodline, whatever, I don't care. I don't need to interview all of it. I don't need to know, and I'm not doing Ancestry.com and stuff, so don't care. Just pulse that everywhere. However, if I got stuck trying to figure out the specs on my specific thing, it ties me down to more of a 3D story than I care to be involved in. It is useful, definitely useful sometimes. When I'm still in the toilet with some 3D emotion, I better get in the toilet and swirl around a minute and make sure that it's not, a turd in a punch bowl, that it's actually a turd in the toilet, and then flush that as I hop my way out of it, but I need to know, where am I? What am I looking to gain from this? If I'm just looking for confirmation of the shit I already know, I'm staring at a bowel movement that maybe I didn't even leave there, and just flush it and let it go. However, we can get stuck in feeding that old system by wanting to narrow it down to identities. And this is really about becoming our own identity outside of the 3D, outside of that matrix and that fear understanding of, I need to nail down what they're doing. I need to nail down how they're coming at me. I need to nail down how I'm going to protect myself against them. And the sovereignty really is better served, in my humble opinion, with know what is around you. Definitely be situationally aware in a 3D level and all the way beyond, as far as you can. However, I don't know that it's necessarily always the best to know what my enemy might be doing. Just know that people are doing whatever they're doing, and they're screwing whoever they're screwing, and whatever. It makes no difference, and I will not effectively change, really truly, at a level that's truly going to help the system and make it better for all of humanity and Mother Earth, then I'm not really going to make that much better unless I get above that and drop something from higher than that into that. The way of healing for me to understand is more to be revealing what is above me that can pull me up to a greater understanding of what is beneath me that I see. Not beneath me as in it's unworthy of me. It's quite worthy of me to continue healing not just my literal bloodline, to continue sending back into any kind of a bloodline, any kind of anything, there's something snarky around me or that I feel in me. Stop that. Be a better human and get about that for whomever it is, whether it's inside of me. I want to soothe whatever is barking, whether it's me or whether it's outside of me. It does not mean that I'm going to placate 3D people or put up with their bullshit on any level. I didn't say that. What I said, though, is that when I'm in astral space, lucid dreaming, whatever, or I'm working in alchemy or energy understanding, and I'm doing my timeline work, my grid work, or whatever it is that I'm doing, then I can't really meet that from a 3D understanding or an agenda in me that's holding any malice or any problem with anybody in particular. If I still come up with a problem or I got butthurt and want to express that, then I'm going to need to deal with that. However, I don't call that the same level of work. I need work to do for me and get real local within me to understand that, so that I can move that up to the penthouse of me to have a better understanding of what the basement looked like. And once I clear the basement, then I can move up. However, I think we kind of, I know I have gotten trapped in, listening to readings or listening to spiritual insights, etc., and looking for the specifics of how does this apply to me as that particular story. I should be able, in my opinion, should's not one I use, so that's interesting. I would rather be able to listen to any reading from anybody about anything and understand where I am in that, because we are all one. However, differentiating it out into, my specific something, well, I can do that, but can I also understand that how does this apply to me as both sides of this or all sides of this. And that's where I see sometimes that there's not always the accountability. Now, I don't want to get stuck in, well, I know that I was also that, and so therefore I deserve to be punished for what I did and not really ask for, anything from them. I didn't say to get into all those weird conversations. I'm saying that I can find compassion for that and still, in my 3D world, have my foot right up in it to say, absolutely not, are you going to treat me that way, out here? Because no matter what I'm doing in an astral space or a lucid dreaming space or any of that, if I'm not seeing that out here in a 3D format, then I treat it like what I see out here in 3D, and however work with that astrally. And where I see changes, great, awesome. However, I don't expect anything. I put my work, I seal it, and I send it on its way with no expectation of how that's going to do anything in particular for me to benefit by seeing it in a certain outcome from over there, wherever there is. This is about seeing the difference in me and feeling the freedom of detaching from the outcome of anything that I might see or not see, and how does it broadly apply to me. So whenever I hear this lady today, she's talking about high level complicated stuff that is enmeshed. It's highly toxic because nobody understands themselves. If one person's suffering, they're all suffering, and that was the case when I was there too. Well, if I'm going to offer any support as a high level energy worker, then if I'm asked to, I don't jump into stuff that I'm not asked to. And sometimes it comes screaming through and I go, pass, keep it going. And I'll ask if I'm not sure, hey, is this something that I'm to work with, or is that just a reality check of what's happening in 3D that's energetically, spooging over into my world? Yeah, pass that on, let it go, that I'm not engaging that. And when I know that it's time to stop and listen to this, that's why I listen to that lady. It happened to show up in my timeline or my stuff on my YouTube stuff, then okay, then that's a message I know already. I've established that for myself, that listen to her. She understands high level messages and multifaceted and deeply entrenched stuff. She reads very well your specific stuff. So when you see that story come through on your timeline, jump in there, because she's got something for you, and she does every single time. However, I wait for that to come to me rather than look for the forecast and the daily temperature check of stuff that I don't want to know what the temperature check is in 3D. Why would I want to know what it is in 5D? I can wait for it to come screaming by me and know that this is for me to work with, or just let it go and get more focused on what is me. How do I individuate me as my own individual person out here in 3D as I continue to divine into unity consciousness with my higher divinity sources and my higher consciousnesses of me. However, in 3D, if I assume that I need to know something more than what a multi-level reader is able to tell me, and this is what's happening here and here and here, I can work with that. If I'm going to assume that I need to do more, then I'm assuming far more than I care to. With this isn't my job. It's not my full-time status to be, the person that's energizing or healing or doing anything for anybody else. For me, yes, 100%. However, for something else, absolutely not, because that's not my space to do that. That would be like me jumping in and offering CPR to somebody who's just simply lying down taking a nap. How do I know what you're doing, fella? Unless you are asking for help, or you're absolutely giving some signs of you're in distress, and even then I'm going to wonder, is this mine to mess with? I don't mean in 3D, by the way. I mean energetically, because most of the time humans are quite nosy, we're quite intrusive, and we need to learn how to not be codependent and messing with other people energetically, financially, sexually, emotionally, physically. It doesn't matter. We're quite intrusive and we are enmeshed, and so some of it is about simply knowing that, yep, there's some distress over there, and if you're feeling the pressure that's coming your way, that's a sniff of it as it's being whisked away. You don't engage that. That's just simply an update of, that might be why you feel a sensation in your ear, that might be why you feel a twitch in your left eye, might be why. That's all you need to know. Is there something I need to do with that? No. Keep rolling with your hike. Keep rolling with your day. Keep going to work. Keep playing. Keep doing what you're doing. And when it's time to actually sit down and offer up myself a little more fortification because that stuff's coming in hot, then that's what I do. However, being gunned up and ready for war all day long is exhausting. So why would I do that? I leave my security detail in place to do that for me, and they alert me, hey, incoming weird stuff, might want to take a look at that. And it's very rare that I'm proactively taken somewhere to work with that kind of thing anymore, because that's the whole point of moving into energetic sovereignty and spiritual freedom, is that we learn how to take care of ourselves. And 3D humans are going to be butt sore and butt hurt about that kind of thing, because it digs into our emotions. However, the emotions are how we express our energy, and that is exactly how we heal, by unclogging a lot of that real pent up stuff, that karmic garbage has got, spiritual constipation going. Well, have a diarrhea moment, however, have that at your house, because I'm not here to clean that up, and I'm not your kaopectate, nor am I, your anti-diarrheal. I'm not any of that. I'm not the source of what breaks that apart necessarily. I'm not your laxative either. I'm not a part of that. That's your whole colon cleanse experience with spiritual you, unless I'm called specifically to do that with you. And better, you're not mine, because I'm the one that has to do my own. And so that is the greatest lesson and understanding for me personally has been in knowing that just because I'm a healer and I can do stuff doesn't help to be enmeshed as a healer any more than it does as a 3D human who's codependently helping people with things that they don't really need help with, and it's going to help them grow stronger. To have to, learn how to walk all the way, baby. If I carry you 3/4 of the time, it's going to take you even longer to learn how to walk. And I'm the one that needs to learn how to get stronger, watching my child learn how to walk and fall down and bust their face maybe once or twice, but they'll get really good about catching their balance. It's not about putting people in precarious situations or leaving them to suffer, gratuitous suffering. However, it's not going to be gratuitous suffering if I'm not observing it. And if it isn't mine to observe, I need to take my eyeball, my third eye, my eyeballs, my whole attention off of it, to not be offering it any energetic input at all, because as humans it is very difficult for us to stay neutral on any level when we've had something that was far from neutral in our experience or our background. So that seems like it's enough, and it's about time to keep it moving. Yes, I hope that you are well no matter what part of the day you're in. I hope you enjoy it, my friend, and get within your skin, because you're divine. It is absolutely fine, and it is operating at multidimensional levels all the time. It's not necessary to pipe into that all the time, perhaps, or maybe it is. It's a matter of knowing your own system and knowing what your job is, what you do, if you care to, and really honing the skill of what brings me joy in this moment, what brings me satisfaction, what brings me a sense of peace and well-being. And if going down directions where we're going to have to be reminded of tragedy and, terrible things that have happened without there being a way to resolve that, I'm not sure that I find that the most expedient route to easing my own suffering. So do as you will. But anyway, you're divine, absolutely fine, and can help you in and out of all of that very easily and just fine. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you again next time. Goodbye, my beautiful friends. Mwah.